Welcome to Finance Buzz Friday, your go-to for the latest and greatest from the world of financial services. Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive into a report that has really been making waves in the UK financial industry.
Yeah, this is a big one.
So picture this, your investments,
Yeah.
but they're being impacted by rising sea levels or government regulations on fossil fuels. Might sound like something out of a sci-fi movie, but this is the reality that the UK financial services industry is facing as climate change starts to become a bigger and bigger factor.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how climate change has gone from kind of a niche environmental concern to this mainstream financial risk that everyone's talking about, and the Bank of England, specifically the Prudential Regulation Authority, or the PRA for short.
Yeah.
They just released their PRA Climate Change Adaptation Report 2025, and it's a really clear signal that they're not messing around. They're taking this issue very seriously.
It seems like the Bank of England is really sounding the alarm bells here. They're not just talking about saving the polar bears anymore. This is about protecting the entire financial system. So for those of us working in finance, what are some of the key takeaways from this report?
Well, I think the report is essentially a wake-up call for the whole financial services industry. The PRA is basically laying out a roadmap for how banks and insurers need to adapt to the risks and also the opportunities presented by climate change. They've identified two main types of risks: physical risks and transition risks.
Okay, could you break those down a little bit for us? What do they mean for the financial sector?
Sure. So physical risks are the easiest to understand. They refer to the direct impacts of climate change, like more frequent and severe floods, droughts, and storms. And these events can obviously damage property, they can disrupt business operations, and ultimately lead to significant financial losses for banks and insurers. One example that the report specifically mentions is the Thames Barrier, which protects London from flooding. The PRA points out that the barrier will need significant upgrades to keep up with rising sea levels. And if those upgrades don't happen in time, well, the potential economic damage from a major flood could be absolutely catastrophic.
Yeah, that's a pretty sobering thought. It seems like climate change is a threat not just to the environment, but also to the stability of our whole financial system. So we've talked about the physical risks. What about those transition risks you mentioned?
Yeah, so transition risks are a bit more complex. They arise from the move towards a net zero emissions economy. As governments implement policies like carbon pricing, and as consumer preferences shift towards sustainable products and services, certain industries and assets could lose value very quickly. Imagine a bank with a large portfolio of loans to fossil fuel companies. As the world transitions away from oil and gas, those loans could become much riskier, potentially leading to huge losses for the bank.
So it's not just about extreme weather events, then. It's about the fundamental changes that are happening in the economy. As we move towards a more sustainable future, this sounds like a pretty major challenge for the financial industry.
It definitely is. And the PRA's report really emphasizes that early action is key here. They actually conducted something called the Climate Biennial Exploratory Scenario Exercise. Back in 2021, it was essentially a stress test for the financial system, where they modeled how different climate scenarios would impact banks and insurers. And the findings are pretty clear. Acting early to mitigate climate change is far less costly than waiting. The longer we wait, the more disruptive and expensive the transition will be.
It sounds like the PRA is saying adapt or pay the price. So what steps are they actually taking to ensure that the financial industry is prepared for these challenges?
Well, they're taking a three-pronged approach: supervision, policy, and capability building.
Okay, that sounds pretty comprehensive. Can you break each of those down for us?
Of course. So on the supervision front, the PRA is going to be watching banks and insurers very closely. To make sure they're adequately assessing and managing their climate risks, they're going to be asking tough questions and demanding concrete action plans.
It seems like they're really putting their foot down. They're not just issuing warnings. They're actively trying to shape the industry's response to climate change. So what are the policy side of things?
Well, the PRA is working with international organizations to develop global standards and guidance for climate-related financial risk management. They're essentially trying to create a rule book for how the financial sector should be dealing with climate change. This will help ensure consistency and transparency across the industry.
So no more Wild West when it comes to climate risks. And finally, what about capability building? What does that actually entail?
Well, the PRA recognizes that this is new territory for everyone, so they're investing heavily in providing training and resources to help the financial sector understand and manage climate risks effectively. They're running workshops, publishing guidance documents, and collaborating with industry experts to build capacity and expertise.
That's encouraging. It sounds like they're taking a collaborative approach,
Right.
recognizing that everyone needs to work together to navigate these uncharted waters.
Absolutely. And here's something important to keep in mind. The PRA is getting tougher. They've been issuing guidance on climate risks since 2019, but now they're planning to update their supervisory expectations later this year. This means stricter rules and potentially higher costs for financial institutions that don't get their act together.
It's clear that the PRA is taking climate change very seriously. They're not just issuing warnings, they're actively shaping the industry's response to climate change. But what does this all mean for the average person working in the UK financial services industry?
That's a great question. And it leads us to some of the most crucial implications of this report. Well, for starters, you can expect to see a lot more scrutiny around climate risks. Whether you're assessing a mortgage application, underwriting an insurance policy, or managing an investment portfolio, you'll need to think about how climate change might impact those decisions.
So give us a concrete example.
Sure. Let's say you're a mortgage lender. You might need to start factoring in flood risk much more seriously now. That cute little cottage by the river might suddenly become a lot less desirable and potentially even lose value if lenders start seeing it as a high flood risk.
Yeah, that makes sense. So climate risk is actually starting to change the real estate market. Are there any other areas where we might see similar shifts?
Absolutely. The insurance industry is another one that's going to be hugely impacted. As extreme weather events become more common, insurers are going to have to adjust their models, which probably means higher premiums for everyone, especially those in high-risk areas.
So that vacation home on the coast might not be so affordable anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Insurers might even start excluding certain types of coverage, or even pulling out of high-risk markets entirely. We're already starting to see this happening in some parts of the world.
Wow, that's a real wake-up call for anyone with assets in those vulnerable areas. So we've talked about mortgages and insurance. How will these climate risks affect the investment landscape?
Well, the PRA is pushing financial institutions to really align their investment portfolios. With the transition to that net zero economy we talked about, this means moving away from carbon-intensive industries, like fossil fuels, and increasing investments in renewable energy, green technologies, and sustainable businesses.
So basically, we could see a huge shift in where the money is going.
Exactly. And this is a huge opportunity for those who are ahead of the curve. Investing in climate solutions isn't just about doing the right thing for the planet. It's also about recognizing where the smart money is headed.
It sounds like climate change is completely reshaping the financial landscape.
It really is. It's creating both challenges and opportunities.
Right.
And I think this PRA report is like a roadmap for the UK financial services industry. It's urging us to adapt, to innovate, and to build a more resilient and sustainable future.
This has been really insightful. I'm sure our listeners are wondering what they can do personally to prepare for these changes.
That's a great point. And it leads to some of the most practical takeaways from this report. So first things first, I think it's crucial to adopt a proactive mindset. Don't just sit around and wait for regulations to force your hand.
Right.
Start educating yourself about these climate risks and opportunities, like right now. There's tons of information out there from the PRA, industry groups, and research institutions.
So knowledge is power.
Exactly. The more you know, the better. And the next step is to actually start incorporating climate considerations into your everyday work. So like whether you're assessing a loan application, or underwriting an insurance policy, or even making investment recommendations, ask yourself, how might climate risks and opportunities play into this?
So it's not just a separate issue anymore. Climate change is something we need to think about in every financial decision.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to have these conversations with your colleagues, with your clients, even with your bosses. The more we talk about climate change and how it affects finance, the better prepared we'll all be as an industry.
So collaboration is key.
Absolutely. And one last thing. Don't underestimate the impact you can make as an individual. Even small things like reducing your own carbon footprint, supporting sustainable businesses, or advocating for climate-friendly policies, all of that can make a real difference.
So it's not just about what we do at work, it's also about aligning our personal values with our actions.
Exactly. Climate change is a global challenge, and it demands a global response. And the financial services industry, we have a crucial role to play in creating a more sustainable future.
That's a really powerful message. So to wrap things up, it's clear that the UK financial landscape is about to undergo some major changes.
Yeah.
And those who are prepared, they'll be the ones who come out on top.
I couldn't agree more. This PRA report is a call to action for all of us. By stepping up to this challenge, we can protect our financial system and help build a better world for everyone.
It's been a pleasure talking to you today.
Thanks for having me.
And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us on Finance Buzz Friday. We hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought. Stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll see you next time.